In 2023, I recorded a song called Home of the Fighting Elks. The vocals are pitchy, the production quality is worse, and it is the second least listened to song I've ever recorded. So why do I want to talk about it? And how does it tie together a vulture, the pandemic, and the death of one of my oldest friends? Stick around and find out. Okay, so I have a story that starts in 1996 and ends in 2023. So why not go Tarantino with it and start in 2020? Because, yeah. So basically, 2020 pandemic. I think like a lot of people, I had been in the corporate rut. I'd just been all about paying those bills, taking care of the family. It just all work, no play, that kind of thing. Didn't have any problem with it, but then you get some time at home, and because you have to be, and you start thinking about all this stuff. So you kind of have these little epiphanies, and you see lots of people who, well, you know, I worked for Goldman Sachs and I was a hedge fund guy, but now I'm an artist or whatever. I didn't go that far with it, but you know, first thing I thought of is like, what do I love to do that I just don't do? And I looked over at my guitar and I'm like, oh, you. And basically my experience for a long time with the guitar would be, I'd pick it up once a month, get mad at myself for being out of practice, I'd get mad at the guitar for looking at me funny, and then I'd put it back down for another month. So I decided that not only am I going to back up on the guitar, I'm going to pick up on everything, and I'm going to learn how to do stuff I don't even know how to do. I'm going to get my backup vocal abilities and upgrade it to lead vocal abilities. Still working on that. I'm gonna learn new instruments. Maybe I'll learn lap steel. Maybe I'll learn the bongos. You know what? I should just order a drum set and, you know, start working on drums. So, but with all that, I want to record it. I don't know how to do modern recording, so got to figure that out too. So started doing that. Had a bunch of songs recorded, just the music for, and I'm like, oh yeah, now I have to write songs too. So I wasn't sure what I was going to write about. Put together a couple of songs, and I was kind of happy with it. And then up to 2023, I found out my friend Adam passed away. This was a kind of a strange one because I would put it under the category of sudden but expected, if there's such a thing. You know, I'd worried about him for a long time, and, you know, I never really kind of thought he'd be long for this world. And so when it happened, I didn't know exactly how to express it. You know, do I mourn? Do I think about the good times? And I decided I would write a song. And so that's why the song, what do I call it? Home of the Fighting Elks. That song is really close to my heart because it has a lot of meaning behind it. It was also one of the first songs that I finished recording, so it's got some rough edges. I may not sing great now. I really didn't sing great then. Production quality, I could have mixed it better, you know, but I never have really thought about going back and remixing it or re-recording it or anything, because I mean that I recorded that when I was in the moment, and I was, you know, feeling everything at that moment, so I like it the way it is. Judging by the number of listens on it, I may be the only one, but I think it has a good story behind it, and I think it's pretty entertaining. So I'm going to talk about some Texas road trip stuff. So in 1995, I decided to go back to college, and I went to Ranger College. Can't remember exactly why, but I went and lived on campus at Ranger. Basically, I had kind of dropped out of school and thought that I just wasn't college material. And then I entered the corporate workforce, and I had bosses with degrees that didn't know the difference between spelling there or there, if you know what I mean. And I realized, I was like, man, these people are pretty dumb. Like, how did they get degrees and I can't? Like, so this gave me confidence. And so I went back to school, and I would spend 4 days in Ranger, and go to school. I had a cool roommate, but he wasn't too cool, so we didn't want to spend that much time together. We weren't like going and hanging out a lot, so I didn't have distractions. And then I would go spend like 3 days, like the weekend, in Granbury, and I would deliver some pizzas, make enough money to where I had something, and I would go back to Ranger. And I had this just great semester. I came like dangerously close to getting a 4.0, and so I felt pretty good. Now, during that time, I started hanging out with Adam a lot, and so we always had fun together. It's all we ever did was have fun together. And we did a lot of like road trips and stuff. Now he was younger than me, and he was a senior in high school at that time. So when he finished high school, when he graduated, he tells me that he actually plans on going to Ranger, and he's going to walk on and play football. And I was like, oh my God, we gotta be roommates. Like, this is awesome. And that was basically the beginning of the end of my tenure at Ranger. We were horrible influences on each other. It was also the beginning of the end of his entire college tenure, as far as I know. We basically just were a huge distraction for each other. We loved hanging out together, and yeah, that wasn't so great for our collegiate careers. So my second semester at Ranger comes. Now I've got Adam as a roommate, and I think it was our second day there. I decided, hey, let's go drive around. That's what we always did. We were always driving to Cleburne or Everman or some random place. And so now that we're in Ranger, I never gave really much thought to the town. It always just seemed like a dump, to be honest with you. You know, I'm sure every town's great if you got the right people around you, but from an outsider point of view, it just seemed like there was nowhere to work. Nobody had any money. It seemed like half the buildings in the houses in town were empty, and looks like nobody lived in them for like decades. And yeah, all I'd really figured out is the burritos were good at Allsup's, and yeah, it was just a really dead town with nothing to do, and it just seemed kind of just downtrodden. And right out of the gate, the first time we leave the dorm together, Adam notices something that I hadn't noticed, and it's right in city limits. He pointed out that on the left side of the road was a church that looked like it was way too big to be in Ranger, and it said First Baptist Church on it. And right across the street was another church that looked like it hadn't been a church for decades, and it said Second Baptist Church. And I'm like, what a weird town. And so right off the bat, he starts pointing out stuff. And as we're driving around, I'm looking and we're talking about how many vacant buildings there are. And I'm like, how weird is that? So I actually I wanted to know, like, why is Ranger like this? And so I had a professor who was way overqualified for Ranger College. He had like a wall full of these degrees from all these East Coast universities, and he was living in Ranger because he wanted to be close to Archer City, which he wasn't that really that close to, but I guess that was the closest job he could get, because he was writing a book about Larry McMurtry. And so all this dude did was spend time thinking about, studying, and talking about like Texas local small town culture stuff. So I figured I'd ask him. Now, when I asked him after class, I think he was completely blown away, because nobody in Ranger wants to be there. People that are going to class there are usually trying to get into Tarleton or Texas Tech or somewhere else and trying to get their grades up. There's a ton of athletes there that most of them have a felony or something, and that's why they're not at a Division I school. So he was blown away that I had this question. So he went in and started giving me an answer. So he starts pulling out a bunch of books and all kinds of stuff. And we just sat there and talked forever. And he told me that Ranger had a gigantic oil boom in like 1917 or something like that. And it was such an oil boom that the town grew to like 20,000 people. And they actually call it the boom that won World War I. And So this town got really big. Everybody's making money hand over fist. And, you know, they had 2 banks there. And it was just hard to imagine because this town, when I'm there, had like 2,500 people. It was basically like a ghost town almost. And, you know, I checked recently, it's still on the decline. And he just had all these fascinating stories about how Ranger's local government in the 20s was actually openly KKK members, and they ran under like the Klan ticket. And they basically stayed in power until they really started alienating like Catholic business owners, and the Catholics were finally like, all right, we're voting you out, because they refused to do business with Catholics or minorities. So, yeah, and there was like all this stuff like right under my nose. So, I started just talking Adam's ear off about all this stuff, and we would go driving around, and we ended up with another guy. His name was Cody, not the Cody that maybe people associate Adam with, but this was a guy who was on a full ride to Ranger to be their mascot. And he would wear like a big fuzzy hat with a cowboy hat. Like he looked like Rowdy, the Dallas Cowboys mascot. And he would ride around on a horse during the football games. And that was this guy's deal. And he was just a hick. He was a cowboy. And he was really cool. And he loved going on these little rides with us. And he showed me that there was they just call it the oil fields. And if you go on the other side of the interstate from Ranger, there is just this maze of roads that go nowhere, that used to go to oil wells. And you could just drive around back there forever and ever and ever. And eventually, even if you get lost, you'll end up finding your way back to Ranger. And you won't see a house, you won't see a person, you'll see a rattlesnake, and you'll see a lot of animals, but because it was kind of reclaimed by nature. And you could just get out and hop a fence and walk around. Nobody cares anything about this property. Don't ever if anybody ever tells you that the world is like overcrowded, just send them to Ranger. I mean, you could fit entire countries in these oil fields. And there's just these rusted metal pipes and pieces and oil fittings and whatever you call this stuff, just laying around. And it's just like when the money was gone and the oil went dry, everybody just booked it out of there and left that place. And just, you know, just whole buildings. There's whole like complexes of like duplexes where you would see like all these houses were just left. People just break the windows out of it. And like any homeless person just wandering through Ranger could just claim one of those if they wanted, and they don't even want it. So yeah, but it was really interesting. And I think the most entertaining of these little road trips we made around Ranger, I started getting organized. I actually looked up and said, hey, today let's go to Breckenridge, which was a town about 40 miles from Ranger. Just seemed like a good distance to drive. Never been that direction, never been to Breckenridge. And about halfway there, we came upon this tiny town. And it was one of these where it's so small that they're not incorporated. So they have the city limit sign doesn't have the population on it. And as we got closer, I could see that there was a person like sitting next to the sign. And when we got up to the sign, I could see it said Necessity. That was the name of the town. And there was a guy that looked like he was from like Central Casting for Deliverance. And he was sitting in a lawn chair up against the city limit sign. And he had overalls on with no shirt underneath it. He had a straw hat, had these like nasty old work boots, and a beard. And he was just sitting there with a shotgun. Like, it was like he was guarding the town, I guess from outsiders, but we're outsiders. And as we drove by him, he just kind of looked up and glanced at us, but it's not like he started shooting or anything. So yeah, that was like the most hillbilly thing I ever seen in my life. And then I saw there was a cemetery right on the edge of town there. So we actually went in, you know, constantly checking over our shoulder to make sure shotgun guy didn't follow us. But yeah, it was a cemetery. I remember one of the headstones was just a little piece of concrete, and it just said infant 1883 or something, and that's all he put was infant. And then most of the names on the headstones were Nelson, but every single one of them, the S was backwards. And so basically, I think when I tell people in New Jersey and New York that I'm from a small town in Texas, I think that's what they think I'm from, which is not. But yeah, so needless to say, every time we went out somewhere, something crazy happened. So it was awesome. So the song Home of the Fighting Elks has to do with kind of the mother of all road trips that came out of my time at Ranger. And that was, I believe it was July 2nd of 1996, I think. And what happened is I was in the dorm and I called my parents on the payphone. And it was the week of July 4th, and my mom said that she was off of work, and my dad was going to take off of work, and they were just going to hang around and have a very, very long weekend. And she said, you ought to come down. And without thinking about Adam at all, I was like, yeah, I'll come down. I was like, you know what? I got class today and tomorrow. I'll just cut class, and I'll come down now. And she's like, great. Yeah, come on down. So I hadn't thought about Adam, and the reason that's important is Adam didn't have a car. And so if I leave, he's stuck in Ranger. And I'll tell you right now, nobody's hanging around Ranger College on July 4th weekend. So he was just going to be stuck there. So I come back to the room, and I just tell him, I was like, hey, Adam, I'm gonna head down to Austin, just skip class the rest of the week, and go down and stay at my parents'. And he kind of had puppy dog eyes, and then I was like, oh my God, I don't want to leave you here. I was like, and he was standing there, had a book in his hand, was about to go to class, and I was like, do you want to go? And he didn't even answer. He just threw the book on the bed and was like and just didn't pack anything, nothing, just walks out the door with me, and just so spontaneous. And so we take the very familiar drive to anybody from Granbury is the back road to Austin, the Hyco, Hamilton, Evant, Lampasas, Leander, Austin path. Hadn't been on that in 25 years and still know it by heart. And so when we were halfway between Hamilton and Evant, I see some roadkill in the road, and I'm going about 65 or 70, and these vultures are there, and they're spooked because they hear the truck coming. One flies this way, one flies this way, and one can't make up his mind, so he kind of hovers, and eye level just hits the windshield. And when we hit this vulture, glass just goes flying in our faces. It's total chaos. The buzzard is actually stuck in the windshield, and it's flapping its wings, and it's hitting the windshield and throwing up more glass. I run off the road. It's summer in Texas, so it's very dry, and there's just dust, and I'm barely keeping control of the truck as I'm trying to slow down. I can't see. The windshield it's shattered. There's a hole in it about this big with buzzard, and then the rest of it is all just completely splintered, and you can't see through it. And I eventually come to a stop, and when I finally do, we're very fortunate we didn't hit a sign or a telephone pole. I come to a stop, and then the cloud of dust behind us catches up and passes up, and you just can't see anything. And during that time, I saw the buzzard kind of walk off of the hood, and I know this thing's got to be really hurt. So I get out of I see Adam's okay, I'm okay. I get out of the truck, and I'm checking out the windshield. Adam goes another route and decides that he's going to murder this vulture, and he takes off running after this thing, and it's over in a ditch. Adam's a big, imposing dude at this time, especially just scary. I mean, he went there to play football. And this buzzard just flew away like he wasn't even hurt, which I probably would have done the same thing if I saw. I mean, I've never seen him like that. Man, Adam was ready to tear this thing up. I don't know what he would have done if he caught it. But I try to drive. We get back in the truck, and if I go more than 5 miles per hour, these little tiny pieces of glass just start flying in our face. And plus, we're sitting on glass. And so I get out and I knock the whole windshield out, and it doesn't make it any better. So I'm trying to drive without a windshield, and it's not going to work out. But I know my parents are always home. They're only like, I don't know, 60 miles away. So I threw out the idea, won't we just hitchhike, get a ride to Event, and I'll call my parents from a payphone. So small town Texas, someone's always willing to pick you up. First truck that drives by, old Chevy work truck. It was orange and white, but the door was green. And this guy said he'd give us a ride to Event. And we got in the back, and there was a blue heeler dog that was just laying down and kind of watching us. And it is insane how much this resembles an exact scene from Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. It's like almost the same truck, non-matching door, and even looks like the same breed of dog. Because I went back and watched it recently, and I was like, oh my God, that's crazy. So after that, we got to Event. So we walk into this little grocery store. Actually, not a bad grocery store, but as far as Event goes, they got a yellow blinking light that just kind of suggests that you notice the town's there. They don't ask you to slow down or stop. You've got this grocery store. You've got like a tractor supply or feed store kind of thing, and a school, and then houses, and that's it. That's the whole town. They've got maybe 400 people tops. And I go into the grocery store, and they saw us get dropped off, and so we're getting a lot of looks from people, just kind of, it isn't the "you ain't from around here, are ya?" like threatening kind of thing, but it was all just kind of like, huh. So I go up to the cashier, and I get 2 waters, and I have $3 cash. Adam has 0. So this is like all our money is going to this bottled water. And I can tell this girl's curious. And so I just told her what happened, about the vulture. And she's like, ain't that something? And I paid, and I'm pretty sure it was $2.14. Gave her $3, and she gave me $3 in quarters back. I was like, I don't think this is right. And she said, it's for the payphone. And I was like, oh my God, so nice. All right. Well, I promise you, any quarters I don't use, I will give back to you as soon as I don't need them. And she's like, don't worry. I was like, I don't want your drawer to come up short. And she's like, I'll just tell Mary, she'll take it out of my check. And guys, people were so nice. And so I went and called my parents. And of all things, 2 things that never happened. 1, they didn't answer the phone. And number 2, the answering machine wasn't on. And I called them over and over and over, and nobody ever picked up. So after an hour of trying to call them, I finally remembered I knew a guy who I had his phone number in Austin. Weren't close friends at all. And I'm about to call him and ask him if he'll drive from Austin to Event in the middle of probably a work day. And I called him, and shockingly, he's like, oh, I know exactly where that is. He's like, I'm from Brownwood. I used to go up through there all the time. I'll come out there. I'll come out there right now. And so once we no longer had to worry about who's going to pick us up, now we have the reality of like, we got to kill some time in Event. So there is this strip mall, or what used to be a strip mall, right by Highway 281. Every single business there looked like it used to be an antique shop. And it's closed. It's been closed down for decades. And one of them has a church pew sitting in front of it facing the highway. So we just sat down. And after a few minutes, we started to settle in and just start to watch the town in front of us. And it was actually one of the most interesting days of my life. Not even kidding. We just started watching all these people, and Adam was the first one to do this. He started naming them. So we saw this one guy that kept driving back and forth from his house to the store. I don't know why. And he called him Earl. And we would give these like little country names to people. And then, some guy walks up to us and he's like, you those boys that hit that buzzard? I'm like, yeah. And that was about the first of like 8 different people that asked us about that. One guy walked up and asked us if we were the guys that hit the buzzard, and we said yes. And he said, all right, well, I need some help moving a dresser. Y'all got a minute? And I'm like, okay. So he put us to work, and we went and moved this furniture. He actually gave us $5 each, which was awesome because, you know, and I was able to go give that girl her quarters back. But I think the most eventful thing was at 3 o'clock when school let out. We just watched the people, you know, the kids on the playground. You had the high schoolers going out and looking under the hood of a car. You know, there was like the big pickup line with all the parents, and we were just so fascinated with this, and they seemed to be really fascinated with us. You know, even though we were 200 yards away, we were definitely getting a lot of looks. We were like, something doesn't belong here. And this one guy that we named Todd O'Bannon, I don't know why, but that was the name we came up with. He saw us, and he looked like a relic that was some kind of combination of Billy Madison when he went back to high school and was in the Trans Am with the jean jacket and the REO Speedwagon shirt, crossed with Wooderson from Dazed and Confused. But it was even more ridiculous than that, because this guy, he had hair parted in the middle that was like feathered, and like aviator sunglasses, and he tied a bandana around his neck, and he had a Trans Am, like 80s Trans Am, and he saw us, and he got in the car and cranks it up and just, and he drove over to us, pulled up and stopped, rolled down his window and looked at us, and then gunned it and spun his tires. It was like some kind of Animal Kingdom, like marking his territory thing. And we were just kind of like, huh. And, you know, pretty ballsy when you think, I mean, Adam's a big, scary dude, and I'm also there. I don't know how scary I am, but I mean, there's 2 of us and one of him, and I mean, he's like putting on the intimidation. Yeah, so we were just kind of taking all this in. So it might have been one of the more serious conversations I ever had with Adam, because we started talking about small town life, you know, and how this whole thing was like its own little ecosystem. And because I think from my point of view, you know, I went to a school that was almost that small in Toller. And I used to say in high school a lot of times, I was like, oh man, I can't wait to get out of Toller. And a lot of the people I went to school with who grew up there, they would say the same thing. What I didn't realize is they didn't mean it. Like, I actually did. You know, I planned on living, I thought of myself as a city boy. It just hadn't lived in a city yet. But, you know, I went back and visited recently. A lot of those people that we used to talk about that are still there, and they love it, and it's awesome. You know, it's like you've got that sense of community, and you could just feel the connection between people there. And I've never thought about small town life the same ever since then. You know, and I think that and every time I saw Adam after that, it always came up. We would always, whether it was like talking about if we would live in a small town versus a city, whether it was like making jokes about Todd O'Bannon, wondering what he's up to, or if he's gonna, you know, leave any girls for the rest of us, and, you know, all these jokes we would make. All right, so I started this thing out mentioning Tarantino, and God, this thing ended up a director's cut. I mean, shut up, am I right? But in all seriousness, that's my story. That was my kind of celebration of life. That was my kind of send-off to Adam. I wrote a song about our best times together. If you notice, when I was in the core of that story, didn't mention death, because I kind of wanted that to be separate from that story. I wanted that song to not be a sad song. But anyway, I don't know what else to say, you know. I mean, cherish your friendships, you know. I mean, especially get old like me. You know, you never know, you know, how long people are going to be here. So anyway, let's listen to some music.
into